Hello. What's up, everyone? I'm Sade. Thank y'all for joining me on my podcast, Hidden Alchemy Podcast. And for today's episode, we are diving into self worth as well as building value and self esteem. Now, this is definitely a topic for me that really hits close to home because I feel like I have been working through this really my entire adult life, trying to figure out what is my self esteem based off of and how can I develop just a stronger sense of self. So, in this podcast episode, I'm going to be diving into my own journey with dealing with low self esteem, ways that I have worked through my self esteem, and just tips that you can use so that you can really feel empowered and understand that you are the only person in control of your personal power. There is no power that a person can give to you or take from you. Everything you need stems from yourself. Now, on the topic of self esteem, I really wish that this is a topic that we should have learned really young. And maybe some people did learn this very young, but your self worth is truly the deciding factor in everything that you do. Like, if you have low self esteem, you are going to do everything with low self esteem or a false sense of self. And really, self esteem is just the perception that you have of yourself in believing that you are worthy or unworthy of obtaining or having something. And especially if you have low self esteem or have a poor understanding of yourself, then you're going to move through the world as if you're not worthy of having the things that you want. And when you move from that space of feeling unworthy, then you don't have a sense of confidence. And people can see that, and people are going to continue to treat you based off of that low self esteem and self worth that you have. Now, more on a spiritual level, when we're dealing with self worth and self esteem, that comes from the solar plexus, which is the energy center in the body that deals with our courage, our confidence, and it is represented by the signs of Aries as well as Leo. And it's right by your core. So, usually, I tell a lot of people, like, if you're struggling with self worth and self esteem, definitely work out because you building up your core, not just for the sake of having a six pack, but really working on that solar plexus is going to activate that energy point of confidence, of courage, of value, of self worth, and really just putting yourself out there and taking those risks because you feel worthy, not because other people are telling you who you are and why you are worthy or not worthy of something. Now, truthfully, in my opinion, I feel like self esteem is a form of emotional maturity. And the reason why I say that is because if you have a deep understanding of yourself, then no matter who you're around or any situation that you're in, you're going to move from that space of understanding and understanding. So there's really nothing that a person can tell you, whether that be a critique or a compliment, that can sway who you are. And I can honestly say, when I struggled with my self esteem, I was always in shambles if someone had something to say, right? If someone had a critique about something I did, or if someone had an opinion that was different than my own, I would start to feel internally lesser than. And that was really because I did not have a deep understanding of myself. I did not love myself. And in order to really love yourself, you have to understand yourself and you have to respect yourself. I feel like in this industry of self love, self care, we bypass the fact that in order to love yourself, you have to understand who you are. You have to know who you are. And knowing who you are is what boosts your self esteem and it also boosts your emotional maturity. When you take the time to study yourself, to focus on yourself, to understand why you make certain decisions, and most importantly, not judging yourself. And that was another thing that really helped and aided to me having low self-esteem was the amount of shame and judgment I had about myself when I would do certain things. So that's definitely a good point to keep in mind is when you shame yourself or when you're constantly struggling with guilt based off of how you feel about things, how you feel about a person, that is a way of lowering your emotional maturity within yourself as well as your self-worth and your self-value. When you can truly look at yourself for the lightness and your darkness. And that was the thing. I was not trying to acknowledge my darker side. And that's another podcast topic I'm definitely going to talk about, understanding the lighter and the darker feminine. But I was not trying to acknowledge my darker side. I was not trying to acknowledge the areas of my life where I was the villain, where I was the problem starter. where I was the person that was actually bringing the issues to a situation. I only really wanted to see myself in this lighter side. So I had a false understanding of myself, a false representation of self. But when you do that deep self analysis and you sit with yourself and you meditate, that's another thing I'm going to bring up, the topic of meditation and why that is pivotal in you building self worth and self value. But when you do that deep inner work and you're seeing yourself for who you are and you're accepting yourself, it is so, so important to accept who you are. Accept the way that you think, accept the way that you move, understand where these things are coming from. And when you accept that, you love yourself. And when you love yourself, you're able to move in the world with that confidence and that courage that has nothing to do with any type of materialistic thing outside of you. So often we base our self-worth and our self-esteem off of what's my job title, how much money do I have in the bank, what are my goals, am I being successful? And granted, those things are super important because that helps you to, in this matrix and in terms of your ego, because you do need the ego, it helps you to feel good about yourself. It helps you to feel like, okay, like I am this person out here doing these things and I'm that girl. Like it's great. But if you have no understanding of yourself outside of your job, the money you have, your success, the fame, the this, the that, you don't have a sense of self. And that's the scariest part for most of us. It definitely was a scary part for me when I started my spiritual practice. It was like, I have no understanding of who I am. And I based all of my understanding off of the things that other people tell me. And it's so dangerous, y'all. It is so dangerous, especially as a woman, as a human being in general, but I'm going to speak from a place of what I know being a woman. As a woman, when you lack that emotional maturity because you lack self awareness, you put yourself into relationships, whether that be friends, whether that be business, whether that be romantic. You put yourself into relationships where other people can sense that about you and use that to manipulate you and work against you. And then it messes you up mentally because you never had an understanding of who you were to begin with. So, really taking the time to spend time with yourself, accept who you are, understand who you are, and moving from that unapologetic truth, that is what's going to develop your emotional maturity because you know who you are. So, when you are around certain people or in certain situations or environment, you're not going to sabotage things. We don't talk about how much like self-sabotage comes from low self-esteem. And there was a point in my life where I sabotaged everything because I lacked self-esteem. I lacked self-awareness. I would sabotage jobs. I would sabotage situations, opportunities, things that were sent as an opportunity. I would sabotage them because I couldn't see myself. I would sabotage relationships. I would meet amazing people, but because I didn't feel worthy of being in that type of relationship, whether that be business, friends, romantic, I would sabotage it. And all of that stems from having low self esteem. And we can sometimes, when you're dealing with imposter syndrome and you're sabotaging things, we like to blame other people. We like to say, okay, it was this person who did this to me. It was my boss who made me feel this way. And back to what I said at the beginning of this podcast, no one can take power away from you. No one can give power to you, and no one can take power away from you. All of your personal power comes from yourself, your self esteem, your self worth, your self value. So when you get this, I'm telling you, being on the other end of just feeling so inspired by the people around me, but most importantly by myself, because I spend time with myself, I understand myself, I have my practice, I feel unstoppable. Like I'm not swayed by a critique or a compliment because I know who I am and I know why I'm here and I love who I am. So I can move freely from a place of love, being okay with whether or not a person can accept it or not. And that's another thing when you have high self esteem. And it's not, I want to be clear that having high self esteem is not the same as being overly confident and cocky. That is a part of having high self esteem. But having high self esteem and self worth is really just feeling good about the way you view yourself in your highest and your lowest and moving from that place. And when you move from that place, you're in your truth. You're always going to be in alignment with the right people. And when you are not in alignment with the right people, you have enough courage to say, okay, this situation is not for me. This friendship is not for me. This relationship is not for me, because it does not allow me to continue thriving in the courage and the confidence that I already have for myself. And you don't have to be cocky about it, right? When you have a healthy form of self esteem, you don't need to put other people down to make yourself feel better. That is actually a form of low self esteem that is masked as high self esteem. And also, women, if you are in a competitive state, if you think that I need to be in competition with this woman because of X, Y, and Z, again, you have low self esteem. Because as a woman, and I'm going to dive into this when I talk about my feminine energy, the light and the dark, women don't need to compete. That's a masculine thing. That's a masculine energy. Unless you're in a sport, then yeah, you compete. Playfulness. But when we're talking about you see another woman at work or you see another woman on the street and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this better than her. Nah, you have low self-esteem. You got to work on your self-worth. You got to work on who you are, because two winners can be in the same spot. So whenever you're dealing with that competitive state, if you ever feel like you got to put other people down and make yourself feel better, you're not moving from a place of high self-esteem. You're moving from a place of low self-esteem, insecurity, okay? And you're in that masculine energy, which is cool, but you're not in a healthy space of self-awareness and self-acceptance. And another thing about self esteem is, again, like I said, being able to reflect. Okay, you need self awareness in order to boost your self esteem, because you need to see where in situations that you were actually the problem. And when you can do that without beating yourself up, without feeling guilty, without feeling shameful, and without pride, that's another thing. Like, having too much pride is a form of low self esteem, because you have to be able to reflect on yourself and say, you know what? I could have handled that situation better. I could have treated that person better. I could have said this in a better way. I'm going to apologize because I know who I am and I know how better I can be. And then I'm going to change my behavior because I believe in my worth. So, so important when you have that self worth. There's nothing you can't do. And once you are developing your self esteem and your self worth, the people who benefited off of you having low self esteem, you are not going to be able to be in relationship with them anymore. And that was a hard pill that I had to swallow as I really developed my practice and spent a lot of time just understanding myself and loving on myself, respecting myself, honoring myself. Is I started to have more boundaries and I started to say no to certain things. And I wanted to celebrate myself in a different way. I wanted to move differently. I wanted to love on myself out loud. If you have people around you who are struggling with their self esteem and you are bettering your self esteem, that relationship at some point is going to have more space. And the reason being, if you are portraying yourself from a higher place, not being higher than a person or lesser than, at some point, someone is going to be jealous. That's the reality. Someone is going to be envious. Someone is going to say, oh, who do you think you are? Why do you need to wear your hair like that? Why do you need to dress like that? Why do you need to? And it's really because they are coming from that place of a lack of self-worth. Because what another human being is doing, that should not bother you, right? But when you're overly concerned about it, yeah, it's because you lack self-worth. You lack that self-awareness of yourself. So when you are developing your self-worth and your self-esteem, you're going to have to reevaluate your circle, because the people that benefited from you not valuing yourself and not moving with courage and confidence in the world, they're going to start to dislike you, or they're going to be inspired by you. It's one of the two. I would wish for the latter, of inspiration, so that relationships can stay. But the reality of life is that's not how everybody thinks. Some people are not going to like you anymore because they can't benefit off of you, or because they don't like the way that your confidence is showing to them where they're not confident. And either way, that ain't your problem. That is not your problem. Focus on yourself, focus on bettering yourself, and you will be able to have everything and anything you want out of your life. Now, let's go into tips and ways that you can better your self esteem and ways that I have been using to help me better my self-esteem. First things first, you need to be in a space of solitude. And I know that for a lot of us, that is a very uncomfortable space to be in because we base a lot of our self-worth off of how other people feel. And you need to be in a space of independence, of solitude. You need to spend time alone. That's the only way you're going to understand yourself is if you can spend some time alone. Yes, there are ways we understand ourselves by being in partnership. But again, it goes back to that Aries Libra aspect, right? Aries is the I am, the independence. Libra is the we are, the relationship. Me, I'm an Aries moon. So I'm very big off of, okay, I need to have some space. I need to have time to myself. I got to figure out my own independence before I can be in these different partnerships. And spending time in solitude has been a lifesaver for me because after I am done with socializing and being of service, which I love being of service, I get to come back home and I get to just chill. I get to be silent. I get to hear my thoughts. I get to take a moment and check in with how I'm actually feeling about things. And then I can reflect and then I can move from that space of self-awareness. Self-awareness comes from solitude. Now, another way that you can develop your self-esteem is through a meditation practice. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to meditate. Why? Because how are you going to hear yourself if you are not silent to hear yourself? Right? So you have to have a meditation practice where you can start to just understand your psyche. How do I think? And there's so many things that happen in the day that we really don't get to process everything that we see and everything that happens until we take a moment of breath, we take a moment of rest, and then we can really say, okay, how did this situation make me feel? What did I actually notice from this person? Okay, now I can check in with my emotions. I can check in with my psyche. Emotional awareness comes through a meditation practice as well as solitude. That's how you can build maturity in understanding your emotions. I had to work at this because I had no understanding of this until I further developed my spiritual practice and was meditating constantly and then realizing, oh, this is how I operate. And because I understand how I operate, this is why I can't put myself in certain situations because this is how I operate. And that is a way of protecting yourself. And that is a way of having emotional maturity as well as deep self-awareness. Now, another way to develop your self-esteem, what I mentioned before, is through working out. Working out is such a beautiful mechanism to mentally push yourself forward and physically push yourself forward. When we're putting ourselves through a vigorous type of workout, we are literally pushing our body and our mind past its limits. And what that does is that boosts courage, that boosts confidence. And though it might boost courage and confidence on like the physical aspect, because of course, when you're working out and you see yourself in the mirror and you like what you see, there is nothing better than that. There's nothing better than working out and then looking at yourself and being like, yo, I look good. That makes you feel good about yourself. But on a deeper level, when you are going through a strenuous workout, it's your mind that's pushing you through. So you're starting to speak positively to yourself. Even if you don't realize that you're speaking positively, you're like, yo, I got to get through this workout. So I got to be careful of my breath and I got to be careful of my mind, which is a form of moving meditation. So that's why I would really advise people, if you are struggling with self-esteem, work on working out, work on your meditation practice, spend some time alone, journal so you can really see your thoughts. Our palms are gateways to our heart. So when you are writing, you're not necessarily trying to mask how you feel, right? When we're speaking, we are thinking and speaking at the same time. So we're making sure that we're careful of the words that we're using. But when you're writing what's on your heart. You're writing what's on your mind, and you can really let the truth come out and come to the surface and bring more awareness to yourself. Now, a final few ways that you can work on your self-esteem: go to therapy, get help, have someone assist you with your thought process so that you can see that the way you're thinking might not be the best way, right? And I talk about this in my previous podcast video of my journey with therapy and why I think everyone needs a therapist or everyone deserves a therapist is it's okay to bring someone else in to help you navigate things in a way that you thought that you knew how to navigate by yourself. Just because you're working on your self-esteem and you're taking this time to be in solitude and meditating, etc., doesn't mean that you can't take a piece of inspiration from other people and have them plant some seeds into just you reevaluating your thought process and your perception on yourself. Finally, your diet. Do not underestimate food. Food is a form of love. Food is a form of culture. I love food. I love food. I love food. But when you choose foods that are good for your body, it's okay to have cake and snacks. Like all those things are great in the moments that they're great. I'm not here to talk about dieting in forms of body shaming at all. I'm here to talk about dieting in terms of choose foods that make you feel good, right? Choose foods that your body gets fuel from. Because when you are in control of what you're putting in your body, then you can start to feel in control of yourself. So when you're choosing these foods that, they taste good, but how are they making you feel? Are you sluggish? Are you tired? Are you getting acne all over your that means that you got to work on your diet. You got to drink more water, stay hydrated. Okay? Dieting. Foods is a beautiful, beautiful way of healing oneself. I love healing and cleansing my body through my food choices. And I love helping other people figure out what foods are best for them, what herbs are best for them. I'm very, very big into herbs, which will be another podcast topic. But yeah, so many different ways to work on loving on yourself, respecting yourself, and building your self worth. Because at the end of the day, everything you do stems from your worth of self. And that's something that they don't teach us in school. If you lack self awareness, and that's why society benefits off of us having low self esteem and lacking self awareness. And I remember Kanye said this, and I know people don't like Kanye too much. Listen, I remember Kanye said this, like, society benefits off of you having low self-esteem, lacking self-worth, not understanding who you are. So when you take the time to just love on yourself a little bit, give yourself compassion. I tell this to my students all the time. You are one of your greatest teachers. So you have to always extend yourself grace. You're human. Give yourself grace on your journey. Love on yourself for all aspects of yourself. And that's how you're going to be able to boost your courage and boost your confidence. And most importantly, inspire other people. Because that's what we're here to do. We're here to inspire and we're here to guide other people to live their life a better way and to love their life a better way as well. So thank y'all so much for today's podcast episode on self-esteem, self-worth, and value. Cannot wait for this next season of so many different types of topics that I will be diving into this podcast season. So I will see you for my next video.